This is the case of Rosemary West, considered to be one of Britain's most sick and twisted female serial killers. Rosemary West's name is forever tied to a nightmare that unfolded behind the doors of a seemingly ordinary British home. Alongside her husband, Fred West, she carried out some of the most horrific crimes in British history. But behind the tabloid headlines is a chilling tale of childhood trauma, unchecked violence, and systemic failure that allowed the unimaginable to continue for far too long. Rosemary Pauline Letts was born on November 29, 1953, in North Devon. Her early years were deeply shaped by instability. Her father, William Letts, was a violent and controlling man diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Her mother, Daisy, battled depression and underwent electroconvulsive therapy while pregnant with Rosemary. A fact some psychologists later believed may have contributed to Rose's emotional detachment and behavioral problems from a young age. Rosemary displayed disturbing behavior. She was known to bully her siblings, act inappropriately toward others, and reportedly was sexually abused by her father, a pattern that may have contributed to her warped views of power and relationships later in life. In 1969, at just 15, Rose met 27-year-old Fred West, a man with his own sinister history. Fred had already served time for theft and had a known interest in sadistic sex. By the time Rose moved in with him, he had 2 daughters from previous relationships. One of them, Charmaine, would become Rose's first known victim. From her family, Rose was quickly drawn into Fred's dark world. They married in 1972, and their relationship, characterized by violence, manipulation, and sexual coercion, quickly spiraled into horror. Together, the Wests turned their Gloucester home at 25 Cromwell Street into a literal house of horrors. They installed soundproof rooms, torture devices, and even hid bodies in the cellar and under the patio. Most of their victims were young women, often runaways or vulnerable girls seeking lodging. Their victims were lured in with false promises of work or shelter, drugged or overpowered, repeatedly raped, tortured, and then murdered. Their remains were dismembered, and many were buried on the property. Among those murdered were Shirley Robinson, Fred's pregnant lover; Lucy Partington, abducted while waiting for a bus; Tari Sigenthor, a university student hitchhiking; Juanita Mott, a former lodger; and tragically, Heather West, Fred and Rose's own 16-year-old daughter, killed in 1987 and buried under the patio. Beyond the women they killed, Rose and Fred were also known for their extensive physical and sexual abuse of their own children and foster children. Their daughter Anne Marie West, for instance, later revealed in court the horrifying sexual assaults she endured at the hands of both parents. The children lived in fear, and any misstep could lead to beatings, rape, or worse. Heather West's fate was a grim example. After confiding in friends and teachers about the abuse, she was murdered. Likely to keep her silent for years, suspicion loomed but never stuck. Social services failed to intervene meaningfully despite multiple visits. It wasn't until 1992 to 1994 when one of the West's younger daughters confided in police that a full investigation began. Detectives searched 25 Cromwell Street and uncovered human remains, starting with Heather's. Fred was arrested in February 1994, and Rose was detained shortly after. Fred initially took responsibility for the murders, attempting to protect Rose, but as evidence mounted, including signs that Rose had personally tortured and murdered victims, she was also charged. Fred died by taking his own life in prison in 1995. Before he could face trial, Rosemary West was tried in October to November 19, 1995, on 10 counts of murder. The trial exposed the depravity of the West's actions. Victims were named, and disturbing details of their final moments were laid bare in court. Key witness testimony from Anne Marie and other surviving children painted Rosemary not just as complicit, but as actively sadistic. She was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life in prison with a whole life tariff, meaning she will never be released. Her appeals in 1996 and later were rejected. Psychologists and criminologists who studied Rosemary West described her as a narcissistic psychopath, emotionally detached, manipulative, and incapable of empathy. She had a charming public persona, which belied her capacity for cruelty. Prison officials noted her odd behavior. She spent hours knitting, praying, or silently staring into space. She reportedly struck up a friendship with fellow notorious inmate Mira Hindley, another child murderer. Despite public outcry, she has never shown genuine remorse. In recent years, public fascination with the case has resurged, particularly after Netflix released Fred and Rose West, a British horror story in 2025. The series used never-before-heard police interviews, survivor accounts, and archival footage to re-examine not just the crimes, but the systemic failures that enabled them. In 1996, the West's home at 25 Cromwell Street was demolished. The address was wiped from maps, and a landscaped pathway replaced the site. Yet, the damage, especially psychological, remains for the victims' families and the surviving West children. Many have changed names, gone into hiding, or publicly shared their stories in hopes of creating awareness around abuse, trauma, and justice. May all these victims' souls rest in peace.